Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Adrienne Price from United Way of Greater Stark County. I'm the Vice President of Community Impact. Thank you very much for joining us here today. With support from donors and experts from across our community, United Way was able to invest over $500,000 in programs to support mental health services ranging from prevention to crisis intervention to ongoing counseling and case management. Thank you very much for joining us, for spending some time with us, and for your interest in the intersection of child poverty and mental health. You see your panelists are here with us today, for which we are quite grateful. We have Patti Fetzer, who is Director of Prevention at the Stark County Educational Service Center, Dr. Michele Heberling, who is Chief Clinical Officer at CommQuest Services, and Mary Kreitz, Training Director and Trauma Therapist at Child and Adolescent Behavioral Health. Before we hear from our panelists, I just want to kind of offer a little bit of context around poverty in our discussion. As many of you may be aware, in our community, about 1 in 7 residents lives in poverty. But the numbers are a little bit different for kids. So among children, 1 in 5 live in poverty. And depending on where you live in Stark County, the numbers of kids in poverty, the poverty rate is very different. In urban areas like Alliance, Massillon, and Canton, levels of childhood poverty are much higher. In Canton, 1 in 2 children live in poverty. So as you see that school bus roll by, every other child in the school bus window lives in poverty. The numbers among Black children in Canton are even higher still. So it's every 3rd Black child in that bus that doesn't live in poverty. So 2 out of 3 Black children who live in Canton live in poverty. The younger you are, the more likely you are to live in poverty. So kids age 0 to 5 have the highest level of poverty of all Stark County residents. Of course, the federal poverty level is defined by the federal government each year, but just to kind of give you an example of what the dollars and cents look like. So for a household, the most common household in Stark County who lives in poverty is a mom with 2 kids. To meet the definition of what is poverty, 100% of the federal poverty level, mom's income has to be less than about $23,000 a year. That's what she uses to support herself and her 2 children. About $9,000 of that $23,000 goes to supporting rent. So there isn't an awful lot that's left over. As I'm sure many of you are aware, certainly in media, mental health is of great concern among students, parents, employees, pretty much everybody that's lived through the odd, if not devastating, last couple of years. We know that there are lots of folks that have lost family members, they've lost jobs, businesses that have ended, and we lost a lot of normal routine life. But for people living in poverty, especially children, because they've got lots of other stressors and adversities that they're dealing with, their mental health has been further impacted. And that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start the conversation with some questions for our panelists, and you're welcome to put any additional questions in the Q&A box. So I'm going to start with the first question. I'm going to start around ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So I'm going to ask if you can talk about, our panelists to talk a little bit about what adverse childhood experiences are and how they impact, how those experiences impact our later life.
Thank you, Adrienne. So as Adrienne's talking about the number of children and families that are living in poverty in Stark County, and we often think about children who are living in poverty, but I don't know that we think about the long-term impact, not only when they're children, not only when they're experiencing that, but throughout the duration of their life. And I think a great way to understand that is actually exploring a little bit a groundbreaking study that was completed back in 1997. It was completed by Kaiser Permanente, which was an insurance company essentially in Southern California. And there's a few key pieces that make this such a groundbreaking study. One of those pieces is just how large it was. So they surveyed over 17,000 individuals, and they utilized a 10-question quiz, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But so it was a lot of people Number two, it was a non-clinical population. So often when we study things like physical health issues or mental health issues, we study those issues in clinical populations, folks that are already experiencing that, but not just sort of your average everyday person that's walking into their primary care just for a physical or a routine visit, which is the individuals that they had fill this out. So non-clinical population. The study's also been replicated many times since the original research was completed with similar outcomes. So the validity of it was just reinforced over and over and over again. It wasn't a fluke that these were the outcomes. And most importantly, were really the stunning results that came from this research. So basically, it's a very simple study, the ACEs, so Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. It's just a 10-question quiz. It focuses on 3 areas. It basically focuses on physical sexual abuse, neglect, and then household challenges, which obviously poverty is #1 primary household challenge. And we often think about children that really end up struggling with significant mental health issues and those kinds of things as those that have actively experienced abuse of some kind. But neglect and really poverty, I've said before when we've had this conversation that poverty in and of itself is an adverse experience. And there are so many pieces that go along with that. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute as well. But the outcomes of this study, what was discovered is not only do those kids and families experience that poverty while they're living in it, but they continue to feel the impact throughout the duration of their life. There were significantly higher rates of depression, diabetes, heart disease, asthma, cancer, and even early death. And so we don't often think about being poor as a child or in a family that's experiencing poverty as connected with diabetes or connected with heart disease or stroke. We don't make that connection. This was the first experience or research that made a very clear correlation between living a very difficult life as a child, growing up in a family experiencing poverty, and it having an actual impact on their physical health and shortening their life. And it doesn't just go away when they turn 18. It doesn't just go away if they're able to go to college or get a good job or experiencing a different kind of life as an adult. The impact of those experiences in childhood stick with them. They're very long term. That they experience those outcomes. And so when we dive down into that a little bit, when we think about living in poverty, one of the questions on the test is, did you very often feel like you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you? So it's very easy to make that connection between that question and not having enough money. But what we don't also make the connection with that high levels of stress around those issues, around the #1 area of conflict or trigger of conflict in a family is money. #1 across the board. Families that are experiencing stress, the #1 likely trigger is finances. So imagine if you're experiencing poverty and you're trying to figure out which bills do we pay? Do we feed the kids or do we pay our rent? And then our housing is not stable. If we don't have access to adequate childcare. So now we have children, we don't have access to adequate childcare. So maybe we're leaving them home alone because that's the only choice we have to go to work. Yesterday, I was talking with one of my colleagues here, and the whole school district closed. The whole school district closed to celebrate a really great thing that was going on in the school, which is wonderful and exciting and fabulous. But our conversation was, what about those parents that rely on that school being open so they can go to work? So now they're panicked trying to find someone to watch their children. And oftentimes families that are living in poverty don't have fantastic support systems of grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and friendly neighbors that are going to keep their children and protect them. And even if they leave those children with folks, and again are doing the very best that they can do, those might not be folks that they would generally leave their kids with, and they don't know what kind of experience their children are going to have in those situations because that's the choice they have to make to be able to go to work, to support their family, to do the things that they have to do. So you have that potential for conflict in the family, connected with folks and adults that are just trying to do the best they can for their kids. And then that incredibly elevated level of stress and anxiety of trying to make all of this work can lead to things like depression and anxiety and trauma in adults as well as in their children. Unfortunately, it can often lead to substance use as well. So you just want to escape that. When you're living at a stress level that's this high all day, every day, for some folks, the only way to get a reprieve from that and escape from that might be in a substance of some kind to numb themselves or to be able to escape. And then their children are part of that experience as well. And I keep going back to folks are just doing the best they can, because we often have a significant stigma attached to folks that are living in poverty. Well, can't they just do better? Can't they just make different choices? That's not what they're forced to face every single day. It's a struggle and a challenge every single day. And so you layer on top of that at a very base level, that inability to get things like basic things like food and laundry detergent, and to get those pieces. So the study was incredible in that it addressed all of those pieces. So the very clear abuse, neglect, but then also those more fundamental pieces connected with poverty and all of the outcomes that lead to that. So you take all of that and you recognize that those coping skills that children learn while they're in an environment where poverty is a huge factor for them, they also learn coping skills that may not be very healthy as they go into adulthood, which negatively impact their health, which may lead to them engaging in substance use, or may lead to their own mental health that follows them into adulthood, in addition to physical health issues. And the last thing I want to just touch on is we often think about poverty in terms of individual children and individual families, but we don't also think about community level poverty. So Adrienne, you were talking about there's spaces in our county that have a different level of socioeconomic status. And there's different spaces in our county that experience high levels of poverty of individual families, but also at that community level. We have things like food deserts. So we have pieces of our community that folks don't have transportation, but they also don't have a grocery store close to them where they can go and actually purchase healthy food. So maybe the only place they can get food is at a gas station or a quickie mart or something like that. There's often greater levels of violence in a community. Again, if you think of a stress system, you think of folks that they're carrying all of that. There's a greater likelihood of domestic violence. There's a greater likelihood that one or more of the parents may go to prison for a crime of some sort, or end up in jail, or be in and out of jail. And exposure to substance use in the community, potential exposure to gangs, as again folks try to find a support system. When you don't have a great one, you seek it out, and just a general sense for these kids growing up in poverty that often doesn't feel safe. It can feel scary to just literally walk out your front door to go to the bus, to be able to get on that bus and go to school. So it's overwhelming, and it has just incredible long-term implications for folks.
Thank you. That's a lot to chew over. My goodness, thank you very much. So with that knowledge, I understand that there may be ways that the community can help to mitigate the impact of ACEs on children, which will further mitigate the impact on when they become adults and to our broader community. What kinds of positive experiences or protective factors are important or capable of reducing that kind of impact?
Well, that is something that is on a lot of people's minds, because that question comes up. Our minds were blown by the ACE study when it came out. It really changed the conversation, and in a very good way. It changed the conversation from talking about, what's wrong with these people to what's happened to them and what have they been through. But when you look at the ACEs, some of them are things that we don't have a lot of control over, or we don't have the ability to always prevent these things. When a natural disaster occurs, we try to do the best that we can to clean up afterward and to provide people with resources and supports, but there's not a whole lot that we can do to prevent another natural disaster from occurring. We know that, you know, having a parent who has a mental health problem is a risk factor for kids, but we don't know ways to prevent parents from ever having mental health problems. The best we can do is offer services and hope that that makes a difference. So one of the things that I struggled with as a therapist was that, you know, that feeling that there's not a whole lot of control. And then I ran across some research from a woman named Christina Bethel out of Johns Hopkins, and she found 7 categories of positive childhood experiences. And these experiences they don't take away ACEs. They don't prevent these things from happening. But what they did was they found that people who had these types of experiences in their life were more likely to be successful and well-functioning, and actually rated their lives as satisfying as adults. And so whenever I think about ACEs, one of the things I think about is what can we do to increase these positive childhood experiences so that kids have a greater chance of flourishing despite having some adversity in their lives. We can't avoid the adversity, but we can definitely supplement their lives with these positive experiences. And they're really basic things. They're things like being able to talk to your family about your feelings. How important that is to every kid to be able to talk about what they're feeling and feel accepted and validated that, yes, these are scary things we're going through, but here's what we're going to do about it. It's things like feeling that when difficult times happen, that your family is there for you and willing to support you, or that some adult or support person is there and willing to support you, that you don't have to go through it alone, that if you mess up, you fail a test, we're still going to love you and care about you, but we're also going to help you study more for that next test. You know, it's really basic things. It's being able to participate in and enjoy community traditions. We lost that a lot when things were shut down due to COVID, but we're getting that back so we can go out and we can be part of holiday traditions. We can go to the Hall of Fame parade and the balloon launch. We can do all of those things that made us feel like we're part of something bigger and that life is fun, that there are things to enjoy about life. Being part of something that is bigger than yourself makes a huge difference. So feeling like you belong at school, that's another one of those positive categories. Kids spend often the majority of their day at school. And when they feel like that school is my school, this is where I belong, where I am welcomed and accepted, they have a much greater chance of doing well in school and doing well as an adult. When they feel that they have a group of peers that accept and support them, they have a much greater chance of doing well in school and as an adult. And one of the kids that I work with actually had a wonderful insight. And he said to me that your friends are people who choose to be with you. Your family doesn't have a choice, but your friends choose to be with you. And I thought that was a wonderful way to put it. That it is important that we want to know there's someone out there who's spending time with me because they actually like me. They actually want to spend time with me. Having at least one adult in your life who is not your parent, but is trustworthy and genuinely cares about you. that makes a huge difference. And sometimes it can be someone like a teacher or a coach. Sometimes it's an extended family member. Maybe it's a grandmother or a favorite auntie. Maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's a friend's mom who just takes a really good interest in you. But having that one adult who really genuinely cares can make a huge difference, because sometimes there are things that happen in our lives that we're just not comfortable talking to our parents about. And there can be a lot of reasons for that. And I'm not saying that it's because we don't have good parents, because sometimes actually it's hard to talk to our parents because they are good parents. Kids know that their parents are stressed or dealing with a lot. They know that if I tell my mom this, it's going to break her heart, and I don't want to make my mom cry. You know, that sometimes helps to talk it through first with someone else that honestly there's a little bit less emotional investment with them. My clients don't mind breaking my heart, so they're okay with telling me their bad news. But talking it through with me and realizing that the world doesn't come to an end makes it a little bit easier to say, okay, maybe they can talk to their mom. Maybe they can share this news with her, or share this bad experience, these feelings that they're having, and that she'll be able to handle it, you know. Sometimes there are things that are just awkward. You know, there's some topics you don't want to talk about sex with your mom. You know, it's kind of hard to tell your dad that you're thinking about maybe having sex for the first time. Those things can be just a little awkward. So having that other trusted person that you can talk it through really does a lot toward helping people to make better choices in their lives. And that kind of leads up to the 7th category, which is like just feeling safe and protected by an adult in the settings that you're in. So feeling safe and protected at home by a parent, feeling safe and protected at school by the teachers and the staff, feeling safe and protected when you're out in the neighborhood, when you're playing sports, feeling that there are people looking out for you, that if something bad happens, there's someone that's going to take care of you, or someone that's got your back and is really just has your best interest in heart. It can make a huge difference. And the research that she did really found that you don't have to have all 7 of these categories to be able to be successful in life. There were some people who had, you know, 6 or 7 of these, and they actually had a 72% lower odds of having depression or mental health problems as an adult. But we know that not everybody's going to have 6 or 7 of these. Sometimes we're going to maybe have just a small handful of them. But even people that had 3 still had 50% lower odds of depression and poor mental health. That's a huge effect size. So it's really just, those are things that I felt like we can do. We can have a relationship with a kid. We can help a kid feel safe. We can help them to be able to talk about what they're feeling, or to be able to, you know, work on their social skills and make some friends at school, or even just give them opportunities to get out and be part of the community. Those are things we can do, and they don't take a lot of money. They don't necessarily take a lot of time, but they can have a huge impact on a person, and that impact lasts throughout their life. That's just amazing to me.
Wow.
Excuse me.
Thank you very much. Okay, so it feels a little more hopeful. There are things we can do. Okay. So locally, what kind of services are there available to get kids those kinds of supports? What can parents or community members do to make a difference in the lives of kids, especially kids in poverty?
Great question, Adrienne. But as you just heard from both Mary and Michelle, and as we know of the work that Adrienne does at United Way, we have we are so blessed with so many resources and really great people in Stark County that are already making an impact and wanting to do more to make an impact. and needing to connect those dots between all those resources when a family needs it, when they're looking to navigate to all the different pieces and parts are what's so important. So here in Stark County for well over 10 years, we've been blessed with the support of the United Way in our school districts to have resources for care teams that we have in every district within Greater Stark County. And we also have family support specialists, thanks to United Way money in every school district in partnership. And those care teams are comprised of school administrators, school counselors, nurses, mental health providers like child and adolescent and CommQuest, family support specialists, school resource officers, and more. And as you heard, the scenarios, I mean, students are referred to care teams for a whole variety of reasons. And actually during the pandemic, when people thought schools were closed down, care teams actually had a huge amount of referrals and were serving needs. We were serving 9,000 students during that pandemic. And in comparison, prior to the pandemic, it was around 5,000 served. So know that the work was continuing. But, as you heard, mental health is just one of the reasons. But what we're seeing growing in numbers is that those poverty reasons, the food, the housing, the clothing needs, and the traumatic life experiences and the events that have continued to be occurring in our communities, the death of a parent incarceration, different traumatic events. So all of these are happening. And at the same time, when we talk research and information, we know from the Census Bureau that even short-term stints of poverty, because you might be laid off from a job or you just might have something that happened that you have short stints of poverty, really can impact that student from being able to access or be involved in those extracurricular activities and those activities of passion that we know are so important, as Mary described, as protective factors. And we also know from our Northeast Ohio Youth Health Survey that we still have many students that still need to be more intentionally connected to those pro-social activities, both in school and in the community. So let me give you a story, and a quick story, because we're seeing the need not only continuing to impact in strong ways in our lower income districts, our urban districts, but it's also coming into our suburb and our other districts. So here's just a scenario. Dad was laid off from his job, and he's actively trying to find work that pays enough to cover their mortgage. And he did some research and found that rent in their area where they want to remain so their kids can stay in that same school district has increased so much that it would be more than their current mortgage. It's springtime. We know all the costs of being involved in school activities. Their 17-year-old Susie wants to go to prom. 15-year-old Johnny needs shoes for that track team and has rent payments due to keep that trombone for his band. Johnny knows, and he's hearing that financial stress that his parents are experiencing. He's having trouble sleeping. He texts his friend in the middle of the night and tells him that he's thinking his family might be better off without him. Stress and lack of sleep also interfered with his focus in class. He's failing that algebra class. Care team has to look at all those factors. They come together and they look at all those factors. And these are real life things that are happening every day in our schools. So mom and dad are connected to United Way Economic Mobility Center to really kind of think through those expenses. And the Ohio Means Jobs has a really great Strengthening Stark's Jobs platform that they connected dad to see some of those options for employment. A local church provided 2 months of mortgage payment just to get them through. Susie was connected to a prom dress donation event that we promote to the family support specialists and the school counselors. They know when there's great events for those prom dresses and expenses. Johnny was connected to Katie's Kids, which is a great program that we promote that knows and can help with funds for things like after school programming, shoes, trombone rentals. Johnny was connected to school-based mental health provider that is on site in his school, whether it be CommQuest, Pathway, Child and Adolescent. to learn and think about some better sleep strategies, such as no cell phone in that room at night, and some anxiety and stress management techniques. And Johnny was also connected to a tutor during study hall to really kind of catch up with that algebra content. And so these are things that happen all the time, just connecting all the great resources that our community has, but making sure that that family and that student knows what's available. So we can be grateful for that. So for you that are on the call and you're thinking, what can I do? What can I do for my role that I play as a parent, as a neighbor, as a community member? I might work for one of the organizations. I might have a lot of resources at my fingertips. What we say is, first and foremost, take care of yourself, because you have to model, like you heard Michele, speak to. We have to model those stress management skills, because we're all dealing with challenges, but we as adults have to model that so our young people in our life can see it and learn from it. And we know that even 2-year-olds can be taught to breathe, like take a deep breath when you're feeling stressed out. I watched that with my granddaughters, and I'm proud of my kids that are teaching those skills even at that young age, or making sure they get outside for a walk or a run to re-regulate. One of the things I want to promote that just showed up in my office right before we started is a JA company in North Canton actually created a social and emotional learning game for young children called Emotion. So you can actually look that up and purchase, but I purchased it for my granddaughters and can't wait to play, because it will talk them through real life scenarios and how to identify your emotions and how to better deal with them. So I'm actually really looking forward to that. Just know, and the other thing that we promote in the schools, and I know our mental health providers promote, is that there's brain health strategies for all ages, that we can remember simple things like making sure, especially with sleep, too many of our students are not getting their amount of sleep that they need, that brain science tells them, and us as adults are not getting it. And that exercise and that healthier eating, it's all impactful. The other thing is, as you heard, really, really intentionally help your own kids, your own children, your neighbors, any children you have touch points with. You might be a coach, you might be a mentor, but help them be connected to activities that they're passionate about, that they're interested in. And just really think about and be thoughtful that the costs can be overwhelming for so many of us, and consider ways to make that involvement more affordable to all, or just make sure that they're aware. And then if you're able to mentor young people, through an organization, that's something you're passionate about. It might be golf. There's First Tee that you can do, or there are just things that you might have music ability and you want to mentor through enrichment. Check out, if you're interested, mentorstark.org is a great way to find out the many mentoring organizations in our community. Be open to career days to be able to showcase young people so that they can see, what's possible for them in their future, and what they might be passionate and interested in. And of course, if you do have extra resources, donations are always needed and always welcome to any of the many plethora of programs that we have available in our community to support our kids and families. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Patti. So I received a question in the chat that I'd like to throw out to the panelists, and certainly those who are in attendance, you're welcome to put some questions into the chat, into the Q&A section if you have questions. But one question I received is, does a child who received quality early education have a better chance of having fewer mental health issues as they age?
I think we can all answer that, but that is an absolutely. We know brain science will say that those early years are the most impactful time of brain development. It's not the only time, and I say this a lot. We are learning much more in the brain science space that our brain is neural plasticity and can continue to evolve and get stronger through the years, but those early years are vital. The other piece that I say is that the parents of those children have to be as healthy as possible so that they can support the activities, the time, the energy to give to their child's early development.
So just to add a little bit of the data around our early childhood education obviously helps kids to get ready for kindergarten. And it's not just learning your ABCs, it's, you know, addressing those social skills, getting some ability to regulate your emotions, manual dexterity. How do I hold a pencil and make it work? But in Stark County, like Ohio, about 50% of kids aren't ready for kindergarten. So giving time early in a child's life to support those abilities is wildly important stuff. Unfortunately, across Stark County, kindergarten readiness scores kind of vary pretty significantly. The range is between 1 and 3 are ready for kindergarten to 3 out of 4, depending on where you live. So, you know, certainly a goal is to get us at least up to the state average, at least 1 and 2. And I think we can all agree that half of kids being ready for kindergarten is just still not high enough. So there's more to do. We are very fortunate to have some home visiting programs like Spark that run across this community to support kids and their parents, because, you know, the parents are their first and best teacher. So we can provide those through those Spark programs. How do you teach a parent those strategies and skills to better support their child? Are there other questions or any other comments from our panelists?
I saw a question that came through that was asking about how to support a parent who might have their own mental health problems. And one of the things that I find to be most effective is that, well, first off, people that are struggling with their own mental health problems often don't see themselves as enough of a reason to go get help. They might see themselves as helpless or not enough of a priority, that it's selfish, or that someone's going to find out how truly messed up they actually are. So a lot of times I will approach it from the perspective of, this is good parenting, that the best thing you can do to take care of your kids is to get the help you need for yourself, that you are making yourself stronger and more available to be a good parent by taking care of yourself, and that you are modeling how to take care of yourself for your child, because your child is learning how to adult by watching you. And when they see that, oh, okay, mom is struggling with this, but she's getting help, then it shows them that it's okay to ask for help when you're struggling with something. And kids are smart. They know that something is going on. But they are going to be reassured by knowing you're doing something about it, rather than just ignoring it or trying to tough it through on your own. That it's okay to get help, that actually is good parenting, that is good self-care, and that they deserve it.
And I saw a great comment or question in the chat of, you know, is going for walks and hikes, is that beneficial to your mental health? Absolutely. That is core. And one of the things that I will say is, one of my concerns in some communities, we're really blessed with Stark parks, and I take advantage of walking through the Stark parks. One of the concerns in some of the communities, that being able to get to some of those places, you have to walk through very dangerous areas. And what we see with a lot of children and families is the families are trying to protect their kids. And so you often see that the parks are underused in some different areas because of the concern of being able to get to those places safely. But absolutely, green space, getting out, playing is vital.
Okay. Are there any other questions for our panelists? Thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. A big round of applause to our panelists for sharing their time and expertise. Thank you so much for joining us. And to those who've joined us on the webinar, thank you as well for taking the time and showing such great interest in such an important topic in our community. Thank you very much.